sanctuary. A little bit of housekeeping just before we get started. If everybody could mute themselves, please, that would be super.
We've muted you as well, Helena, sorry.
Thanks for that, Maggie. Welcome to everybody. Thanks for joining us, and welcome especially to the new councils who are joining us for the first time. Maggie, who is a local authority lead, will be putting her email in the chat. So if you are new to the network, please do reach out, and I'm sure Maggie would love to have a chat with you. We'll be focusing on community cohesion today, with a particular focus on settled and new communities. It's Chatham House rules, so please feel free to speak openly and candidly. We are recording, but it is just for note-taking purposes. We'll try to take one or two questions after each agenda item, but we do have a lot of fantastic speakers, so we might be a little bit limited. Please do comment in the chat or leave any questions in the chat, and we'll do our best to get back to those as we go. So we'll be touching on the contact theory initially and how this kind of aligns with City of Sanctuary's theory of change. That's deeply embedded in the work that we do. A great way for councils to make an impact and progress using contact theory is through comms and events, especially as Refugee Week approaches. And also there are a lot of features that people will have in their strategies, especially the accredited councils who are already doing a lot of this comms and events work. We'll discuss what it looks like practically and provide some tools that you can go away and action locally. And we'll also be discussing a bit more broadly why we're seeing a rise in community tensions like the violence we saw last summer, and also why this might be happening. So the increase in toxic narrative, a failure to address this narrative, and also this is alongside a decline in public services. So lots to cover, some fantastic speakers. If there's nothing else to add, I think we might move to our first speaker, and that is Dr. Linda Tipp.
Hi, thank you. I will try to share my screen. Do let me know if that doesn't work. Does that work?
That's working.
All right, excellent. So yeah, hi everyone. My name is Linda Tipp, and I'm a principal lecturer in psychology at the University of Brighton. I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about contact theory, about what it is. I'll relate that to social cohesion, and I'll also talk a little bit about how we can relate contact theory to welcoming refugees. Right, so to start then, what is contact theory? So contact theory has its origins in social psychology. So I'm a social psychologist myself as well. And the idea behind it is that contact between people belonging to different groups can reduce prejudice, but with the caveat that contact will only have these positive effects under certain conditions. So these conditions are as follows. So the groups need to have equal status, and that means, you know, socially, economically, politically, they need to be of equal status when the contact takes place. Something else that's important is that there's common goals. So the group should work together towards common cooperative goals rather than be in competition with each other. Intergroup cooperation is also important. So contact is unlikely to be successful when there is competition between these groups. So instead, the contact should really involve cooperation and collaboration instead. And then finally, support from authorities is also important. So the contact should be supported by social, institutional, legal norms and policies that encourage these positive interactions. Now, this theory has been tested with many different groups in many different settings using various research methods as well. And in 2006, there have been researchers who conducted a really big review with hundreds of studies that were testing contact theory, and they concluded that the theory did in fact work. So intergroup contact can reduce prejudice and improve intergroup relations in other ways as well. So, for example, by increasing empathy and trust. So there's lots of evidence to support the theory. And of course, it's got many practical implications as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today as well. So when I relate contact theory to social cohesion, I think that the first thing that we need to do is define social cohesion, but that's actually not as easy as it seems, because there's many different definitions of social cohesion in the literature. But most of them refer to things like a sense of belonging, a degree of solidarity within a society or community. And there's an emphasis on shared values, norms, and trust that bind individuals together. And social cohesion also involves the inclusion of diverse groups in society and their integration in social, political, and economic lives. So it really is all about creating a sense of shared responsibility, reducing social divisions, and enhancing social stability, really. So if I then try to relate contact theory to social cohesion, we can say that intergroup contact theory contributes to social cohesion in many different ways. So, for example, by, of course, reducing the prejudice, which is the whole purpose of contact theory, but also by increasing empathy and trust. So, like I said earlier, there's plenty of evidence that shows that contact can increase empathy and trust. Of course, it also creates or contributes to social cohesion by having this emphasis on cooperation, but also by reducing social divisions and barriers, so focusing on equality. And of course, by increasing social integration, we also are linked to social cohesion. I'm really sorry, they're knocking down walls next door. I hope that this is not audible for everyone. Okay, thank you. Right, so the question then is, of course, do we currently have these right conditions? Do we have these conditions for contact to be at its most effective? So unfortunately, some of our own research, so there's some research that I did with colleagues at the University of Sussex. I've got some reference at the bottom here. But some of that research of ours has shown that these conditions are not always present. So we conducted some longer-term research where we interviewed 90 refugees in the UK. We did many focus groups. We collected 280 questionnaires from refugees in the UK over a span of about 3 years. So it's a pretty big piece of research. And this was done with refugees who'd been in the UK for quite some time. So they'd been in the UK for 6 to 10 years. And the findings of that research highlighted the following challenges that are linked to contact theory. So, for example, gaps in access to education. So, we know that free education is linked to age in this country, which means that those arriving age 18 and older often do not have any access to education due to financial constraints. But we also heard of youth that arrived age 15, 16, so GCSE age, who were sent to language classes or who were made to do their GCSEs without support, often whilst not really speaking the language, and then failed. So that prevented them from accessing further education. So, something like this is an obvious lack in equal status then, of course. Then similarly, our research really highlighted the importance of good English language provision. So, like I said, our participants had already been in the UK for quite a long time, so 6 to 10 years when we spoke to them. And many of them still struggled with the English language. And they highlighted how, 2 to 4 hours of ESOL classes a week was not really enough for them to improve. And this was particularly the case for those who did not have literacy skills in their own language. And they really needed further, more tailored support. Then there was also a need for tailored approaches to employment. So the employment rates among our participants were very low, and where people were employed, this was often well below their capabilities. So think along the lines of neuroscientists that were working as cleaners. And of course, that is because their education and their experience is not recognized in this country. And that also had really big impact on their well-being and their mental health. And that links to the next point. So poor health often created a cycle of isolation. So many people were carers for their family members and were isolated as a result. But of course, also those with poor health themselves tended to be isolated, not being able to go out. And there were clear indicators that more mental health support is needed. And then something that was really highlighted as well was the need for safe, secure, and stable housing. So especially in some parts of the countries, refugees really had to move house quite frequently, which is, of course, then very disrupting for all of the above as well, like education and employment and health. So as you can see, many of these examples are really related to that kind of lack of equality. But the good news is that we can do something about it. We can do something to change these conditions. We can work on creating a more positive context, and we can create opportunities for positive contact experiences. So I just wanted to put some examples on here just to show you that the contact in itself was missing too. We really noticed that in our research. So lots of our participants mentioned that they found it difficult to make meaningful connections with people in their neighborhood or in their towns, in their cities. So I've got some examples here for people told us. If we look at the yellow part here, we have a participant telling us about, that they can't really talk to anybody that they don't know. English people are sometimes not properly friendly. If you don't know them, we can't talk to them. You need to know somebody before talking to them. I won't read all of them out. I don't think I've got time. I haven't really kept track of my time, actually. But yeah, some other examples then, people saying that they really would like to be more involved in the local community, would like to come more together. We see that in the pink example there. And saying that, in their culture, that's quite common to come together, but they feel like it's less so here. In the green, we see similar, I'm never invited to English people's houses. English people, they don't say anything to you without knowing you. And then similarly in the blue, again, British people just say hi, have a short talk, and then they go into their houses and close the doors. So these are just a few examples. We had many, many more of these examples. So it's really important that we facilitate this contact. So what can be done then? As we just concluded, we should be facilitating intergroup contact, but we also need to make sure that we create the right conditions for the contact to be effective. So it means we need to create equal status through economic and social inclusion. So we need to ensure that refugees are treated with dignity and respect rather than as passive recipients of aid. So we need to help reduce those kind of power imbalances. And we need policies that promote economic and social inclusion. So, ensuring full participation in employment, education, and healthcare. So we can ensure that interactions take place on a more equal footing. Creating common goals, so community programs that involve both refugees and host populations and shared activities. It could be sports initiatives, job training programs, all of that can foster cooperation. And programs that are aimed at collective problem solving tend to work particularly well as well. So when refugees and locals work together on a common objective, it really reduces the perceptions of seeing refugees as outsiders, and it really fosters that social cohesion. Creating intergroup collaboration, so collaborative efforts like mentoring programs, language exchange initiatives, joint business adventures, that really kind of encourages the locals and the refugees to rely on each other, building trust and social cohesion again. Volunteering and civic engagement opportunities that include both refugees and locals can also strengthen bonds and challenge negative stereotypes. And then in terms of support of the authorities, of course, we need government policies, NGOs, and community leaders to really play a critical role in shaping the attitudes towards refugees. So positive messaging, supportive policies, legal protections, all of these can create an environment that supports contact and reduces discrimination and prejudice. Right, that was it for me. Thank you very much. I'm going to try and stop sharing now.
Thank you very much, Linda. That was really, really insightful. Thank you. I especially liked the encouragement of our politicians to lead on positive messaging. Can be very powerful. I think if there's maybe just That's great. I think Shan's ready to go. So next we will be hearing from Shan, who is the Chief Officer at City of Sanctuary, and we'll be discussing the theory of change. Thanks, Shan.
Thank you. I was set to share, but now the share button's disappeared. There we go. Is that okay?
I think it's just coming through now. It'll probably just be another second. There we are.
Great. Apologies, because I know there are a lot of people on the call that have probably heard this presentation numerous times, but I'm conscious there are a lot of new members joining us, and also we wanted to put the context to what Linda has explained in terms of social context theory and how that relates to our specific theory of change. Very helpfully, the definition Linda gave of social cohesion is what we mean by welcome, and that is our vision. Our vision is welcome for all. Our vision is that the UK will be a welcoming place of safety for all, and proud to offer people seeking sanctuary, offer sanctuary to people fleeing violence and persecution. Crucially, we've been very successful in using the welcome for all, and that's given us an opportunity to kind of influence institutions and people that we might not usually reach. And within a local authority context, it's very much enabled local authorities to secure cross-party support. And it's generally given us that unique opportunity to reach people who might not share may have different views on migration. And of course, then has uniquely given us an opportunity to kind of counter the negative narrative. So just to outline, that's our vision. I'll go into detail of kind of how we do that, what our theory of change is. But just in terms of, not skipping slides for some reason. Here we go. So our strategy is currently coming to an end this year. See the dark circles under my eyes. But very much all of our theory of change is built on movement building principles. So we are working to build a movement, and we are very confident that if our efforts were successful to build a movement, that would translate into significant public support for change in national policy. And of course, in doing so, then in terms of realising our vision of welcome, improved community cohesion. I'm very much not blind to the current challenges, but just to give a positive light to this, we have experienced with the rise of the far right and the increased negative rhetoric, we're actually experiencing considerable growth and interest in our movement. So what we've seen is with the hostility, it's grown, more people have joined have kind of gravitated to join our movement of welcome. So very much kind of two key documents to refer you to, and that's our charter, which sets out everything that we do, sets out the kind of key strategic objectives. Obviously, we will be launching our strategy again later this year, so things are up for review, but we actually require that commitment to our charter, to our values, from all institutions working towards an award as part of their commitment. So in terms of movement building, before I can kind of go into the kind of direct details of our theory of change, everything within our theory of change is built on movement building principles. And out there's kind of clear consensus, I guess, on an understanding of what movements are and how they evolve. And over the last 20 years, we're celebrating our anniversary of when we first began in Sheffield. We very much kind of have designed our own movement building approach, but we very much use a definition of a movement is a loose collection of independent groups and individuals united by a common purpose, but with no one leader. So hopefully those of you that know us well will see that connections with the flexibility, for example, that we give affiliated groups to work towards our vision of welcome. Not one leader, so we have 100 groups, we have our local authority steering group, and we obviously have people with lived experience within our Sanctuary Ambassador network, And particularly we have that kind of welcome for all, so a radically welcome movement that gives opportunities for everyone to engage. So while City of Sanctuary can be described as a movement in its own right, we very much see and aim to contribute, I guess, towards a wider, broader social movement to achieve the changes that we want to see. As you can tell by my accent, I'm Welsh, so we'd also describe Nation of Sanctuary itself as a sub-movement, while started by City of Sanctuary, a sub-movement on its own, working with the voluntary and statutory sector across Wales, and the Welsh Government has a plan, a Nation of Sanctuary plan itself with clear community cohesion goals within it. So that kind of gives you an example of how, you know, we describe ourselves as a movement, but actually it's a collective of sub-movements working towards a specific vision. Why we've taken this approach, academic studies, won't go into the details. I know I haven't got much time, but it's a hill that I'm prepared to dive on because I've dedicated 20 years of my life. And I truly believe that it's only through building a widespread and inclusive movement for change, which gives the space to everyone to join, can we actually influence change and build strong communities. And of course, we've got successful examples of movements, civil rights, LGBT, women's movements, etc. And then what are the successful movements? What do they have in common? And some of the things we've tried to kind of build within City of Sanctuary across the 20 years. Mobilization, so mobilizing people around issues that they hold dear. And we have leadership, as I've mentioned, must be driven by people who are most affected. So we now have a really strong Sanctuary Ambassador network that engages and are empowered to lead across various areas of our work, including the Local Authority Steering Group. Key is that we must have, and we've been working really hard to ensure there's multiple opportunities to influence. So insider advocacy, it's not City of Sanctuary doing that, it's you as institutions, so conversations you have with government officials, for example, but also then having that community organising outside pressure to put pressure on government for change. And then crucially, where I think we've been really successful is we have our streams where practitioners come together to influence, so local authority position statements written to the Secretary of State, etc. And then crucially, those streams also bring that mechanism to knit people together, to bring practitioners and individuals together, the third sector, together with people with lived experience, to be able to kind of implement and embed action and translate that into changes. So successful movements are large scale, multiracial, multidimensional, multi-sector, multi-issue, and we try our best to be working towards that goal. And that's the distinction, I guess, between us and many organisations who use the word movement building. The movement building is not the same as single issue campaigning. Although single issues can be regarded as a sub-movement in itself, the difference is that the issues can change, but the movement stays. And then very quickly, movement building activities, authentic base, people impacted by the issue, good leadership, not one person, a good clear vision, partnerships, so the networks, local authority network, large partnerships like we have with the National Education Union, for example, and then good advocacy infrastructure. We don't specifically have a lot of advocacy infrastructure. We just have our brilliant Hannah as our comms and communications officer and manager, but we work very closely with Asylum Matters and together with refugees. So that's the whole basis of our theory of change. But where does social contact come into it? Well, we're working to build a movement both at a micro and a macro level. So at a micro level, we have our 100 plus affiliated groups who are working to bridge divides in communities through welcoming activities. So bringing people together to build friendship and solidarity. Very mindful of the challenge of creating the conditions of doing that right. And that's really difficult, as Linda as mentioned. One really good example that sprung to mind was a Public Health Wales project that supported refugees and people within social housing to come together to work on a particular issue themselves. So you had that equity, you had that parity within that project, and they were working to reduce dog mess in their local park because that was the issue they were both passionate about. And that actually led to very concrete impact in terms of change of attitudes. Whilst our groups are doing everything they can to promote welcome, the reality has actually been for us that many groups have also had to respond to the crisis within created by hostile policy. So whether that's a hotel being stood up in their area, so providing emergency response. But I think we're really proud that our groups have still maintained this ethos of working as hard as they can to bring communities together and bridge divides. But we've also been conscious that we can't rely just on social contact. And where the step change has been in our theory of change and what we're thinking about now is kind of our work that we have been doing with Speak Up for Sanctuary. And that is based on the kind of premise that conversations with people you trust can ultimately lead to changes in attitudes. And Hannah has done a brilliant job in developing a Speak Up for Sanctuary training and resources to really empower people at a local level to have challenging conversations and speak with people that might have different views on migration. And for us, that is also an additional kind of element of our theory of change that we have been building in, and nationally we'll be working with the big organising project, which is part of Together with Refugees, to give more opportunities to offer training. And we're also open to work with local authorities if that's you were keen to do. And I know many of you have seen the Courageous Conversations resources that we've produced. At a local level, we've also, of course, been working within mainstream institutions. Our awards, very much a strategic tool for embedding welcome. And we do that collaboratively, not just with our groups, but of course, including the grassroots, voluntary and community sector organisations. And very much around social contact, we are ensuring that within that, people seeking sanctuary are leaders within that process. And there's also an opportunity for institutions to work at an equal level with people with the lived experience. Of course, within our awards, we also have a principle called SHARE. Again, for us, that's part of creating a ripple effect of movement building. So awarded institutions are expected to share their achievements, and that's in order to kind of build solidarity and collaboration across communities. And we've seen with schools, for example, within our research, you know, not only does the school award provide an environment that's more welcoming for newly arrived children, but it also shows it has a ripple effect into the wider community as well. So nearly finished, just at the macro level. So that was all of our work kind of at a micro level. And again, reflecting that movement building principle of flexibility. So people do that at very different ways and at very different, in different ways in different localities. At a macro level, we are using our extensive reach through mainstream sector organisations and communities to mobilise people behind campaigns. So very much going back to what Linda said, it's we're building that friendship and solidarity, but the next step is we want people to take action. So empathy, creating that empathy, but empathy then into action. We don't run, as I said, specific campaigns ourselves, but we very much mobilise behind wider campaigns, which I mentioned previously is a really important, necessary movement building component. But there's also an expectation within our awards that institutions speak up for sanctuary. Again, we have that flexibility that will depend on the context, what our institutions actually able to do. But it's really important that element is within our theory of change and within the awards to make sure we build that broad public support for policy and practice change. So I'll end it there just to say all of this is then underpinned by network principles. I won't go through all of them, but in signing up to become an awarded institution, networks and our affiliated groups sign up to those network principles, and then that underpins our theory of change because it encapsulates what successful movements have as components.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Shan. I'll take questions in a minute. I just wanted to point out the training that Shan mentioned, the Speak Up for Sanctuary. I attended recently myself and found it so helpful. And there's also a very glossy, impressive handbook that goes along with it that I shared with members because it is very helpful for members on the doorstep. It's great for other officers, and it just helps us, especially when there are heightened tensions, on how to have those conversations in a productive way. And also the Sanctuary in Politics training, making those opportunities available to residents who may want to get more involved, those residents with lived experience. So Maggie has popped the links in the chat, and I would highly recommend checking them out. It's a great resource. We'll take one or two questions. I can see one hand up just now. That's Margaret. Margaret, do you have a question?
Sorry, I was on mute. So, where can I find the other sessions happening? Can I go to the website and find where the other sessions are happening? When the other sessions are happening?
Yeah, sure. If you go to our events page, the
Which
Speak Up
website is that?
on City of Sanctuary.
Oh, okay then. Can you send me the slides for this session?
No problem at all.
Thanks.
They'll all go out at the end.
The next hand I can see is Sarah.
Hello everyone, very good, very engaging, very practical and inspirational talk. I have a quick question about from Medway Libraries. Is there a local sanctuary scheme that we can connect with? There was a fella that I've been dealing with since 2015, but he's not answering his emails. That may be a local issue, but also when we come to areas where we've got Kent and Medway that might be connected, is there some way of connecting with the City of Sanctuary connections in Kent? Not specific to Kent and Medway, but do you understand that, kind of some of us who are keen and part of the scheme would like to work on a larger scale where people might be moving around and, similar issues and all that? Hopefully that was a coherent question. You know what I mean?
Sure,
Cheers.
thanks for the question, Sarah. I think it might be best to put you in touch with Ashley, who leads on Libraries of Sanctuary. So I'll pop Ashley's email in the chat, and if you drop her an email, hopefully she can get back to you. So thanks for that. If there's any further questions, hopefully we'll come to those at the end. But we will move on to our next speakers, and we'll be hearing from Phil and Gary. And this will be a case study from Liverpool City Council and also IMIX Comms. So over to you, Phil and Gary.
Cheers, Helena. Thank you. Cheers, Gary. So that's who we are, Liverpool City Council. Yeah, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about the summer. Sorry to bring it up, but just to kind of explain some of our experiences and some of the kind of plans we've got to try and move things forward. Are you okay to skip to the next slide, Gary? Yeah, so I suppose like a lot of councils, we had a situation where a lot of our residents felt very scared, very alone, and looked to us as the council for reassurance. And I suppose, like many councils, it was difficult at times to know how to respond. From a communications perspective, a lot of rumours flying around. Both the kind of far right rumours and also rumours of attacks on people of migrant heritage, etc. And it really was really hard to kind of deal with the quickly escalating situation. I think, what we found is a vacuum of information can cause a lot of fear, a lot of anger. We had challenges of how do we communicate to people who maybe aren't connected to our mainstream communication networks. And then also kind of recognizing the kind of human tragedy of it all in terms of the pain that people were going through. You know, for example, one of our migrant voice group members from Syria, he said to me, you know, he felt it was just like when the protests began in Syria, and he almost went back into that mode of survival. And you know, it was really heartbreaking, to be honest. I suppose we did a lot of good stuff from a communications point of view in terms of condemning the burning of the library, very much focus on the community spirit and the rebuild, multi-faith messaging. We're fortunate our politicians were behind us, and you know, we did a lot of work around that has been ongoing and continues to go on in terms of community engagement and community cohesion grants that we've set up, and anti-racism work in schools, etc. I suppose what our residents spoke to us about was that they felt we were at times slow to react in terms of communicating out to people on the ground, and that you know, people said to us that they felt that they needed stronger reassurance, and that maybe we weren't always, our communications didn't always kind of understand the context of that really raw, painful emotion that people felt in terms of this happening in their city, this targeting them, you know, whether they migrant heritage from 100 years ago or came yesterday kind of thing, and that our messaging wasn't always coordinated in terms of our communities team, some of the stuff they were trying to do, and our refugee and migration team, some of the stuff we were trying to do, and some of the kind of corporate communications. So it was almost like there was good stuff happening here and there, but it wasn't really being brought together, and it was slow to really get out to people, and it maybe wasn't always reaching the people that we wanted to. So if you want to flick on to the next slide, Gary, please. I suppose what we've really realized is that one, we need to be a bit more organized around our communications and bring, you know, on Monday we've got a communications officer starting. To be honest, that's been a bit of an ongoing thing before the summer, but it's escalated. You know, it was something we had to escalate really, and they're going to focus on our priority of making Liverpool a welcoming city, the council and migrant friendly organisation, you know, where people can feel safe and can thrive in the city. And that additional expertise also needs to be kind of work together with bringing expertise in, such as IMIX. So, you know, we're going to commission them to do training for all our communications team. And, you know, IMIX have been a big supporter of us locally and also of a lot of our voluntary sector organisations. So in some ways, for us, it's about looking at where we didn't really quite achieve and what our plan is to move forward. So, you know, it's about really taking that opportunity now to bring those experts in and continue to work with them. And I will pass on to IMIX, who can tell you all about how great they are.
Thank you very much, Phil. Thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to see quite so many of you here today. I guess that's testimony to how important this issue now is. My name's Gary Pluck. I work for the IMIX. I'm joined by my colleague Katie Bryson, who also works for IMIX. We're about changing the conversation about migration and refugees. A little bit about who we are. For those of you that don't know us already, we are an organisation dedicated to improving public conversations around refugees and migration within the UK. Our mission is to change the narrative around migration by providing strategic communication support, media training and storytelling guidance. And our aim is to create a welcoming, honest discussion about migration, counter misinformation and highlight the positive contributions of migrants and refugees. The problem, I think, that exists certainly within local authorities, is widespread, it's multi-layered, and it's absolutely dependent on where you are in the country and what the makeup of your communities is. There will be very, very different challenges in all sorts of different areas. It is clear, though, that post-riots, there's been increased support from Reform. they've targeted a number of areas. My local area has been targeted in particular by reform, and that's led partly by the continued negative discourse from media and politicians around the whole subject. A large number of local authority areas, as far as I can understand, have been identified for funding to improve cohesion. And that's a massive positive, but public perception is built on media portrayal as much as it is personal experience. So whilst that contact theory was fascinating to hear Linda's presentation around contact theory is brilliant, but it touches quite a small percentage of your population, of your communities, and as a consequence, you need to contribute some effective communication around what's happening within those communities so that that goodwill message spreads itself out across people who aren't necessarily directly impacted but by that contact theory. The other issue, I guess, is that those violent disorders have affected refugee and migrant support organisations. Lots of those community groups, support groups, grassroots organisations have found that there's been lower attendance once their services have reopened. So whilst this is very much a snapshot of the broad problems that I think exist across the country post-riots, there will, as I said, be much more significant issues that are unique probably to those particular authorities that you represent. As Phil said, there are challenges. The public backlash against any kind of council initiative, and I use one of the examples from Liverpool Council, the 1.5 million grant announcement, which was met by all sorts of negative comments across social media and elsewhere, is always a massive problem. We do have a hostile media. We have lots of negative social media. There's far right propaganda, and as I said, there's Reform UK who often are at the heart of much of that propaganda and negative social media alongside other far right organisations. I won't say that you're all risk adverse communications departments, but in my experience, and I do have some experience working within local authority on cohesion specifically, they are quite risk adverse, and I think they often would prefer the problem to just go away and to remain silent. But that is in itself a very dangerous move. So what's the solution? I think for us at IMIX, we believe that improved messaging strategies to counter negative public perceptions are absolutely key. Better media engagement to reach and inform broader audiences. So understanding who the key players are within your local and regional media, and building relationships with them. Utilising storytelling to humanise the issues and to highlight the positive contributions that are made by migrants and refugees within your communities. And that's a difficult thing to do, particularly for a local authority, but you must build your networks within those grassroots organisations to feed a pipeline of those stories that you can put out and that you can be behind. There is the framing of messages. I think it's very easy for the media or whoever wants to put a negative spin on something to frame that the 1.5 million in Liverpool Council, that the way that was framed by those that wanted to give it a negative spin could have been met quite quickly with a reframing, or ahead of time by reframing it in the first place. There is a massive use in terms of balancing data with storytelling for effective communication. And we firmly believe in the use of the fact, myth, fallacy, fact, or the fact sandwich message, which is there are a lot of organisations that are a little opposed to repeating the myth, and that's quite understandable and quite reasonable. But actually, by using that fact sandwich, you can be really clear about what is true and what is myth. And why IMIX? Well, maybe Phil would be a better place to tell you why IMIX, but I'll do my best. We are experts in messaging and media. We counter negativity, challenge misinformation, and highlight positive contributions. We offer tailored training support, customized media engagement, social media strategies, storytelling sessions, consultations on strategy, and pretty much everything in between. We're experts at combating negative perceptions. We have tools to navigate far-right propaganda, negative media and public backlash. We can provide crisis comms support and advice and guidance. We are incredibly experienced at storytelling and community engagement. We have our own storytellers network full of people with lived experience across the whole of the country. And we're experts at elevating those real stories to foster understanding and support. And we have a proven track record. We're a trusted partner with experience in local authorities, NGOs, and refugee organisations across the country. We have people in Scotland, in the Northeast, in the Midlands, and in the South. So we're pretty well covered, and we're pretty well connected both with the media and with grassroots and larger refugee and migration organisations. So let's collaborate and change the conversation. Contact details for myself. So I'm Gary Pluck, Partnerships and Projects Manager, and my colleague Katie, who I was going to bring into the slideshow, but I've kind of failed on doing that. So I'll let her answer some of the questions perhaps, but she's our media and training manager, and has a massive amount of experience in journalism, having worked for the BBC. My background is marketing and comms, but I've worked quite extensively with local authorities and within the charity and refugee and migration sector over the last 4 or 5 years. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Gary. Thank you for that, and Phil as well. Maggie, you've got your hands up.
Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. I think some of you know me on here, but there's certainly some new faces. I just wanted to say with a lot of gratitude for IMIX that we are going to be working on a resource for local authorities, specifically to support them with messaging, with kind of rebuttals. And I know many of you are getting freedom of information requests, and we do want to give you something which you can reach easily and kind of frame and to help you with your kind of comms and responses. And equally, this resource can be utilized by councillors. I know that some will be going into elections quite soon, and it is something that they can use as the issue of migration is raised on doorsteps, etc. So we'll try and do something in the next month or so. So watch this space. And again, thank you so much to the IMIX team for doing this. And just to kind of plug them again, obviously there is a very important collaboration. I think it's an excellent case study between Liverpool and how they are looking to build capacity within their comms team to support with migration related messaging. So if any of you are interested in doing something similar, I would suggest that you get in touch with IMIX. So I just wanted to kind of plug that in there, Helena. But there is some really good questions in the chat as well. I would suggest people just unmute and ask them at this point. Yeah.
Great, thanks for that, Maggie. Yes, as mentioned, there was one particular question in the chat. Phil, do you want to come back in just before we go to questions?
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to add, I suppose one of the things that within a local authority experience is kind of you have your team, your refugee and migration team, you have your community cohesion team, experts on the ground, really know your stuff. And then you've got your communications team who know the communication stuff inside and out, if that's a technical term. But what the challenge sometimes is when you're speaking to each other, you don't always speak each other's languages, and it's hard to always get the right message between you. And I think what IMEX bring is, without plugging them too much, is they speak both languages, and they're able to kind of bridge that gap, where sometimes it's lost in translation between your on the ground teams and your corporate comms, etc.
Thanks, Phil. Appreciate that. The one thing I would say is that, and I won't mention the local authority that I worked with, but the local authority that I worked with had a significant amount of money for cohesion some 5 or 6 years ago. And part of my role was within communications itself, but very specifically around the communities and cohesions. What is interesting, without naming the council, is that despite bordering one of the major towns that had riots, it had no problems whatsoever, despite having a very, very similar community makeup and exactly the same. They have a hotel that houses a number of asylum seekers. They didn't have a single problem. And I think that's quite interesting. And I do believe that a lot of that is down to the fact that they had spent at least 3 or 4 years working solidly, not just on grassroots cohesion and contact theory, etc., but also very specifically on communicating what had gone on.
Thanks for that, Gary. That's helpful context. There was a question in the comments. I'm not sure if Kay would like to ask it. If not, I'm happy to read it out.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, my camera is playing up at the moment. But yeah, so I work in Cohesion in Mid and Southwest Wales, and we have worked with our communities. Following, we had a situation in Llanelli a couple of years ago where there was a proposed hotel for asylum seekers, and we experienced significant protest and counter protest off the back of that decision, and ever since, really, we've had problems really when we've tried to do comms or training around sort of lived experience and storytelling, and even sort of simple diversity training within schools. We've seen significant doxing of trainers and of head teachers, and people's personal details being shared online, and some really kind of nasty sort of fallout from that sort of activity. So we're quite concerned about safeguarding, and I just wondered really how that was factored in, and any sort of mitigation kind of approaches that could be implemented. Just be interested to hear about that side of things, please.
Sure. Katie, do you want to take safeguarding?
Yeah, of course. I just replied to your comment in the chat, Kay. We've got a very kind of specific approach to safeguarding, and I've just included a link to some of our resources, and we also cover it in the training, but it's just a very careful process of working with people before we put their stories out there, before we kind of introduce people to the media, to make sure that we've got really informed consent, that they really know what, the consequences of putting themselves out there. And if they're in any way, shape or form like vulnerable, or it could like put someone at risk or someone that they know in harm's way, then we would absolutely not recommend that they speak to the media. It's really finding someone who's in that kind of secure place where they feel ready and prepared to do that. So if you check out those resources, you'll be able to see in more detail. And also, we're more than happy to talk about training with you guys.
Thanks, Katie. That's really helpful. And thanks for that question, Kay. I know it's a very real concern that a lot of us have. Wonderful. If there is nothing further just now, we will move to our next speakers, and that is Beth, who'll be presenting a case study from Nottingham City Council.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to apologise that I've not got a PowerPoint. I was really poorly last week and I've got 3 days and then I'm on leave. So I've just kind of made some notes and just wanted to talk through with Nottingham City Council on the position we're in at the moment. And I think we need to think about the kind of context and the kind of history and where we've come from, because Nottingham City Council had a really strong, vibrant years of work around community development. With, you know, we had wardens in 55 community centres, a really strong community development team, youth and play team, area working, neighbourhood management that then formed into, we had a community cohesion team, which did the really on the ground grassroots, real connectivity with community groups. Through COVID and our response to COVID, we set up like locality networks and really strong partnerships with the voluntary community sector. We now have commissioners in the council, and we had to issue section 114 notice. And the reality of that has meant the cuts in and restructures in 2022 and 2024 is that the community cohesion team was completely deleted and it was merged. Some of that work was merged with the neighbourhood management team that had been running for probably around 20 years, doing really strong area working, that kind of regeneration investment, supporting linking with vulnerable communities and voluntary community sector. And in April 2024, that team was deleted. I used to manage that team. So it's been a really, really difficult journey. I know lots of councils are affected, but I also, there's lots of councils that have still got a cohesion team and able to build on that. So in the backdrop of those cuts was also all the cuts to the voluntary community sector with the area grants and the community identity grants of over a kind of $1 million per year. So that's the kind of backdrop that we find ourselves in. The migration team has grown. We've just increased from 5 to 10 members of staff, which is really exciting for us, and obviously picking up on the kind of cohesion issues. But in September, well, 22-23, we started working with the Joe Cox Foundation. So as our kind of cohesion capacity and resources and people dwindled, we started working with the Joe Cox Foundation and some key community partners in Nottingham to set up a More in Common network. So I don't know if many people are aware of the Joe Cox Foundation, the More in Common work, but it's really, really positive, and I think it's got so many links to the work with the City of Sanctuary, and I'm really excited. So this is only my second meeting, but excited to be kind of joining the network and meeting everyone and seeing how we can bring all these different initiatives together. So the More in Common partnership aims around bringing people more backgrounds together, celebrating what we do have in common, promoting mutual understanding and respect, building a stronger community where everyone has a sense of identity and belonging. So that's been a partnership approach. And instead of, you know, initially we thought, oh, we'd set up like in Cardiff, we'd set up a kind of partnership, a kind of formal partnership. What we've ended up doing is having had 3 big community dialogues. And the way that that's worked is it's been a series of incidences. In June 2023, we had a triple murder in Nottingham City that caused a hell of a lot of pain for people in the community. And we also had a fire of a Gambian woman and her 2 small daughters. And there was lots of fears and speculations around that being a racist attack. And in terms of the triple murder of 2 students and a caretaker in the city centre in the early hours of the morning, just absolutely devastated Nottingham, and the anti-migrant narrative that came from that in terms of the perpetrator, assumptions around you know, his background and where he'd come from. That kind of hate, rise of hate because of that was really, really damaging and significant. So we had a community dialogue following the aftermath of that to look at how people were hurting and what the kind of impact that had and thinking about how we can work together to mitigate that. And it's about building those strong connections and networks, and that whole thing that cohesion starts with us. as partners, voluntary sector partners, and that's so important, that strong network. And then we had a second one in March 24, just as the budget cuts were announced, and that was around looking at the impact of the cuts on the voluntary sector and on community cohesion, and what we could do as a response and how we could work together. And then we had the third one, October 24, after the protests and the violence in the summer, as part of Hate Crime Awareness Week, and thinking about the impact of that and how, again, we can continue to build and strengthen our networks and our kind of on the ground work. I think that there was something Gary mentioned around a local authority that had some funding around cohesion 3 or 4 years previously and done a lot of work, and then they had maybe less issues in terms of the protests. I think that in terms of Nottingham, we didn't suffer huge amounts of kind of violence towards kind of people and properties. There was a demonstration of about 150 anti-migrants and around 300 protesters, 15 arrests. And we worked really closely as a council with the police, community groups, Serco, Pacific youth groups that were basically doing all the work they could to encourage young people not to enter the city centre during that period. And that was really positive, put on really, really practical activities and engagement and conversations to kind of divert them from the city centre. On the back of that, we have received £600,000 from the government in terms of the Community Recovery Fund. So at the moment, working through that. We've got interviews this afternoon, actually, for a cohesion and hate crime post. So it's kind of what, we've got a rich history, and luckily myself and Mandy and resettlement manager have got those kind of years of experience of our relationships with the voluntary sector groups, and the work we're doing with the migration team continues to strengthen that. We've got that backdrop, and I feel like we're on this curve where we're trying to bring back the key work that we used to do and respond to the current issues. So we've got that post, but then we've got £300,000 going out to the voluntary sector for cohesion grants, small one-off events, bringing communities together, and then ones for 7,500 more medium kind of projects. And then there will be one grant for 100,000 that will be able to support the post in the council around the whole network and infrastructure, because I think one of the key things around building community cohesion is making sure the voluntary sector groups have got the right support and capacity building around their governance and supporting them with kind of funding opportunities. And that is a huge loss that we've had in the city with all the other grants that have been cut. And I just wanted to mention as well, we've used some of the asylum dispersal grants as well. With Mandy's downstairs at the moment doing the panel for asylum welcome and integration grants. And that includes, practical work on the ground around building kind of relationships and support for migrant communities, but with host communities as well. We've also produced a myth-busting guide. I wonder if I can actually share that just to see whether... I've not used Zoom for a while, so I've gone to share and then can't seem to share. I don't know why.
Feel free to send it over, Beck, and we can circulate it after if that's easier.
Okay, that might be easier, mightn't it? Yeah, so I'll share that. So we've done a myth-busting guide, and this was before the issues in the summer. But that was in partnership. We launched it at Refugee Week. And we also set up an anti-asylum narrative and vulnerabilities group as well, with an action plan around tackling the narrative, but also looking at support around vulnerabilities within asylum-seeking communities that can be preyed upon and used in terms of that anti-migrant narrative. And our fourth More in Common kind of event is going to be in April. It's part of the Joe Cox Foundation Common Room. They're doing about, I think, 4 national conferences, one in Cardiff, Stafford. Ours is going to be around far-right extremism, and we're working with Gareth Harris around that and looking at the difficult conversations and, what we can do as a collective and partnership between the voluntary sector and the statutory sector to mitigate some of that. I just think it's been really interesting because there seems to be more of, in terms of the kind of migration world, more of a focus around cohesion more recently, and with the government as well. So I'm hoping that this £600,000 isn't just a drop and a one-off, and it's actually going to lead to some longer term funding, because it's so sporadic and so varied across the country, the kind of investment around cohesion. Sorry, I feel like I've just talked really quickly and I don't know how much time I have got left, but I think I've covered the main points. I think there's another point I did want to mention as well, is around community centres and community venues. We're being incredibly challenged with the council finances. I was at the in the gallery at the council setting the budget last night, but around community centres and community venues, and there's huge issues going on there. And there's fear for community associations at losing those places that are safe places. And I think it's important to note, with the protests in the summer and with these issues around community centres, it's previous communities that have migrated to Nottingham, and the triggers that the protest causes, it's current migrant community, but people that arrived in the 50s, 60s and 70s that are triggered with memories of things through letterboxes. And just the importance of community spaces being safe spaces around communities of identity as well. When people couldn't go into town because they would be racistly attacked, or they wouldn't be let in venues, having an African Caribbean centre, for example, is a safe haven. So I think it's important to acknowledge and kind of build that in as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Beth. I found it particularly helpful of putting some of our theory into context and what it's like to deliver that. So thank you very much. If there's any questions for Beth, I'll just ask if you could hold them until our last speaker, and we've got a little bit of time for discussion. Thank you very, very much, Beth. And we are coming to the final speaker on our agenda. And that will be Lara from Counterpoint Arts discussing Refugee Week. Lara?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, it's great to be here and see so many people as well. It's wonderful. I'll just start by introducing myself. My name is Lara, and I am currently sitting in the office of Counterpoints Arts. Counterpoints is an arts organization, and we work in the field of migration and displacement. And we're really passionate about the power of arts to inspire change and bring people together and create spaces of connection and understanding that can inspire long-term systemic change and narrative change. And really the origins of Counterpoints is in Refugee Week. So our founder and director, Amir, used to be the Refugee Week coordinator when it was still housed in Refugee Council, and has been involved almost from the very beginning. And when Refugee Week first started, really the history of Refugee Week was much more like London-centric, much more policy focused, much more around fundraising. And there's been such a huge shift, and the festival's evolved into what it is now, which is the world's largest arts and culture festival, celebrating the contributions, creativity, and resilience of people who seek sanctuary. And it's always the same week as World Refugee Day, which is the 20th of June. So this year, the festival will be from the 16th to the 22nd of June. And what makes Refugee Week really special is that obviously arts and culture is at the heart of the festival, and it's community powered. And essentially what that means is that it's an open platform, it's an umbrella festival, and we invite everyone to help make the festival happen. And yeah, as I mentioned, it's been running in the UK for 27 years, and it has a decentralized model. And I have to say, City of Sanctuary and all the work you do is really the backbone of Refugee Week. And I know how active a lot of the local City of Sanctuary groups are. And I know that to receive the sanctuary status and award, you need to mark Refugee Week in some way. I've just been this morning in a library in Canada Water in London, meeting 17 London library service providers. And I've just got off a call with colleagues from Schools of Sanctuary. So it's really so much at the heart of Refugee Week. It's been growing year on year, and last year was our biggest festival yet, with more than 15,000 events and activities, and more than 1.6 million people participated in the festival, and that's in the UK alone. It's also part of a growing international movement with Refugee Week festivals in more than 20 countries that we support to happen. So what does the festival look like? I'm sure many of you will have participated in events and hosted them yourselves, but essentially really everything is allowed. Nothing is too small or too big. So it can be everything from going on a walk with your neighbour to organising a whole citywide festival. We've just heard from Nottingham. Nottingham have like an incredibly well-established Refugee Week. They have their own steering group. They receive funding from lots of different pots. So really it creates like all these local ecosystems, and yeah, so many different locations and cities have their own different governance structures, and that's what's so great, is that it's very flexible to adapt to each local context and feel right for that place. So yeah, I guess in terms of the types of activities, I've just, as I mentioned, I've just been on a call with schools, and people working with educators. So it can be like a school assembly. We have libraries events. We've been wanting to connect more with high streets, and we did a big launch to connect with hospitality, retail, bookshops, libraries, leisure centres. Everyone is welcome to participate in the festival. And I guess the whole idea of Refugee Week is to mainstream these conversations and to create a deeper understanding of the reasons people become displaced and the challenges people face when seeking safety. And really, it's about creating a platform for people who have sought sanctuary to share their experiences, creativity, perspectives on their own terms, all with a view of the long-term vision that refugees and asylum seekers can continue to live safely in inclusive and resilient communities and continue to make a valuable contribution. And as I mentioned, because arts and culture is at the heart of the festival, really the focus is on celebration, joy, and positivity. And that doesn't mean that the festival can't be a container or context for the difficult realities and to make space for that. But it's really for 1 week of the year an opportunity for us to bring people together and use arts and culture to connect with people's hearts and minds and create spaces for connection that are full of possibility. So there's lots of ways people can take part in the festival. So what I might just very quickly do is share my screen. So this is the Refugee Week website, and there's loads of resources on here. There's a lot of helpful language about our values, our vision. No one has to ask for permission to take part in the festival as long as you're aligned with our shared vision and values, and you can find that language in here. You can also discover, oh, it's disappeared, the button. I will get it back up. A contacts page for all of our local coordinators. You can also upload our events onto our public calendar. So we just approve the events, and this gets busier and busier as we get closer to Refugee Week, and people can search by map and postcode and by category of event as well. And as we get closer, you can filter by city, town, and village as well. And then we have a lot of resources. So one of the ways you can take part in Refugee Week is through simple acts, and simple acts are simple everyday actions anyone can do to stand in solidarity with refugees and also make new connections in their communities. And very, very excitingly, we have a collaboration with the Moomins this year, and they have illustrated this year's simple acts, which I'll do a slow reveal, and they are so cute. So all of these are this year's simple acts, and you can click on any of these and find loads of ideas. So share a film. There's lots of films that you can screen for free that either we pay for rights and licenses, or for example, like Channel 4 did a Refugee Week playlist last year. So there's lots of ideas on there, and that will continue to be updated as we get closer to Refugee Week as well. Explore Outdoors is all about nature and going for walks. Read and listen about books and podcasts and music. Meet your neighbors, lots about having conversations, befriending services. Anyway, I won't read them all out because there's so many, but there's lots of wonderful ideas for you can just do a simple act, or you can build a whole event or activity around one of these. This one's all about connecting with sports and gyms and sports clubs as well. So yeah, so there's lots of nice ideas there. And then there's also our resources page, and these are all of our packs for 2025. And there are so many nice things in here, and they're all built around this year's theme, which is community as a superpower, all about celebrating the ordinary and extraordinary. And so there's lots of prompts for ways that people might be able to take part. And I guess maybe the most relevant to bring up today is our neighborhoods pack. So it's all about how local businesses, high streets, and more can take part in Refugee Week. And to be honest, it's just very simple ideas. So you could share this with your networks, but there's a lot of how you can access this year's artwork. If you have tech-savvy social media people in your team, they can use all the individual elements from the poster and create your own designs. I know that a lot of local authorities, I'm not sure if Norwich is on the call today, but they customize the poster, they add their own logos. You can just download the Refugee Week logo and add it onto your own promotional material as well. And yeah, there's ideas for how to take part, whether it's sharing the message, taking part in simple acts, displaying solidarity. So yeah, so you can use these and access all the lovely illustrations as well for the Moomins. So yeah, so there's lots of ideas and inspiration on there. And maybe I'll just end by saying that we have the Refugee Week shop, which you can order postcards and posters for free, and there's just a small charge for postage and packaging, and we can distribute these across the UK. And I know that we regularly get like big orders from local authorities, and it's always just a really lovely thing to have. And the artwork this year is by a wonderful artist called 8-Bit Faz, who is just walking past me right now. And he's done such a wonderful job of the spirit of many coming together to become a superpower, and all the little details in the poster you can explore, and there's like community actions, and you can use those freely in your promotional material as well. And was I going to say anything else? I guess just to end on a few thoughts about the impact of Refugee Week, and it really has grown into movement. It's got an enormous number of libraries, schools, universities, local authorities, major art institutions, local cinemas, like really everything in between all take part. And it's really this message and feeling of joy and positivity that is accessible, and it's for everyone. It helps meet people where they're at and helps us work together all to one shared vision and have a shared purpose. So it always motivates and really is like a superpower for accelerating connections and collaborations. And then obviously we've been talking about media today. Every day we're seeing like, you know, horrific headlines, really negative kind of depictions of this issue. And for this moment, not just during Refugee Week, but in the run up and after, we see such a shift in the way that this issue is reported on, that's much more human centered, but positive and community focused. So yeah, so it really does feel like a superpower to change the way that we speak and be. So yes, I'll leave it there, and just I hope that you all join us in celebrating community as a superpower this year, and excited to see what you all do. And if we can amplify your events or anything, you're always welcome to send them to me. And I'm also always happy to come and talk to your colleagues and teams or connect with artists and creators, whatever is helpful. I'll add my email to the chat as well. But thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you, Lara. You've definitely got me excited for Refugee Week. It seems to come around more and more quickly every year, but it's great to know that there's so many resources on hand. So thank you very much for that. Maggie.
I just really sorry to put you on the spot, Lara. I just wanted to ask a question and use my kind of yeah. So in terms of local authorities, they are involved. Some organized activities, as you know, it's part of the award process. Some support and councillors are really active and they join events as well. I just wondered whether on kind of in addition to Norwich, as mentioned, you have any kind of examples of what local authorities can do.
Yes, I mean, this is really exciting, but some local authorities have now started rolling out grants programs where community groups or artists can apply for small pots of money to do Refugee Week events. I'm not sure if it's restricted to that borough. It might be. So I'm not sure if Hackney's on this call. I know that because our office is based in Hackney, but they have a Refugee Week grants program where people could apply to respond to the theme. So this was last year celebrating our home. So I mean, that's an amazing way of doing things, but we wouldn't want it to be restricted to people like, because that also creates like if you don't receive funding, does that mean you shouldn't participate? So that's just one way of doing things. But I think, honestly, sometimes it's just about directing people to what's happening in your borough. So just connecting with wonderful people doing events, so just amplifying it. So having a Refugee Week page on your website and listing things that are happening is just a really easy, brilliant way of supporting your local community. I know, for example, Hammersmith and Fulham did like a day festival in a local park. And so that was their Refugee Week celebrations last year. I know that that's quite popular with a few different local authorities. I mean, I've just been hearing about a library this morning, which it was a London library meetup. So sorry, all my examples are London based, but they basically just reached out to local refugee groups in their borough, and they made a relationship with one of them, and they got invited to their allotment, and they just took all the library staff team to this beautiful allotment, and they had a meal together, and now they have this like wonderful connection where they just like use their space, and now the libraries said that the staff were going for another meal, and they were planning some Refugee Week events in the allotment. So it's not just strictly in the library anymore. It's created this lovely relationship. So it really is so open to interpretation and people's creativity. But I would recommend, and sorry, I'm talking so much, but one I'll just use as a really nice case study is Gloucester didn't have a Refugee Week. And about 18 months ago, I met an amazing producer who worked for Gloucester Guildhall. They just received their NPO from Arts Council, which is National Portfolio Organisation. And they just thinking that it was quite siloed, and they knew that people were doing some things, but they hadn't really brought everyone together. So we just ran a Refugee Week meet up basically, and it was a very open invitation. I just did kind of similar to what I've done today, just an overview of what Refugee Week is. And then we went round and everyone just did introductions. And there was people from the council, from museums, libraries, refugee service providers, artists. It was like very open. And then we got into smaller groups and discussed the theme. So last year was Our Home, and people shared like what they're already doing that connected to the theme, or what ideas they might want to make happen. And then fast forward, they did Refugee Week last year, and at that first meeting there was 30 people. At the final planning meeting they had 100 people, and they did Refugee Week Gloucester, and the cathedral lit up the cathedral for Refugee Week, and they ended up having 45 events over a week, and now it's become this incredible network, which is Refugee Week Gloucester, and they meet constantly, not just to talk about Refugee Week, but loads of other projects that come up. So it's become a real catalyst for bringing people together. So I always think that's a great way to start, is just to book a space and bring people together. I'm going to Bath. They're going to start the first Refugee Week in Bath this year, and the council's hosting that first ever planning meeting in a space that they have. So it really is a great way of bringing people together. So yeah, and if you ever wanted any help planning that first meeting, feel free to get in touch with me.
Thank you so much, Lara. Just to plug as well, I think Wandsworth Borough Council as well had I don't know, we've got some of them on the call, but they had a little grant scheme as well for Refugee Week. And I think St. Helens, it goes back a couple of years, but they had a football tournament, and the refugee team played the councillor team, which I thought was fantastic. I'm pretty sure which one would have won, but I'm speculating a little bit. So anyway, these are just some lovely things I have picked up through my work. But thank you all. I know we're kind of running out of time. I'll hand back to Helena.
Great. Thanks for that, Lara, and thanks for those comments, Maggie. That does bring us to the end of our agenda items. We have got 5 minutes left for some discussion or any closing comments on any of the presentations that we've heard today.
I like Yvonne's comment. They're also playing the local refugee team. Brilliant.
I'm just checking if there's any questions in the comments. No, if not, it's been helpful just to take questions as we go. I think from a personal perspective today, it was incredible to see so many people attend. I think this has been a record number of attendees, and I think that just shows how important this topic is just now. And there's a lot of goodwill and effort going in to make sure that this is a priority in councils, and it's also been very helpful to see the different examples of what councils can be doing to lead on these conversations. And at times they are delicate conversations, but we mustn't shy away from it. There are wonderful resources there that we can help. So if there's any closing comments from Maggie or Shan?
No, just thank you all for participating. It is a conversation starter. This is a big topic, a big theme, and I know that it is a priority for government. They are going to be producing a cohesion strategy, apparently. So do keep an eye on that, and we will engage with you to see how we can contribute in its development as well.
Wonderful. Thanks everybody for your attendance today. It's been a fabulous conversation, and we hope to see you very, very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.